Chapter 8. Derek inhaled sharply, and the lines in front of Joan spiked, just as they had with Brandon, although there were more graphs to look at now. This time, Joan was ready for it and forced herself to remain seated. Immediately, however, she heard a wild, barbaric laugh, and she looked around the room for the source. Derek was staring at her with wide eyes, Brandon with a wicked grin. The sound was coming from her. She managed to cut it off, clamping her jaw shut, locking her eyes back onto the computer screen, hoping the guys would feel too awkward about it to comment. "Have you finally turned into a mad scientist?" So much for Brandon ever succumbing to awkwardness. She cleared her throat. Sorry, got a bit carried away there. Okay, damage control. Talk about what's on the screen. Use a professional, science-y tone of voice. Derek, your results are comparable to Brandon's, at least as far as the limited data we pulled from him. The electrical current changed in a similar way, the levels rising quickly and then lowering after 2 seconds. They're still higher than the baselines at this time, but diminishing. Other readings are comparable as expected. Heart rate, brainwaves, etc. Your aura size had an inverse reaction, tightening and now gradually expanding, and its color changed as well and is still changing. Veronica will be able to explain the significance of that better than I. No ghost activity detected. Derek gestured to the key. Let's put that away and get Sadie in here to draw more blood. Brandon opened the door and called Sadie back. She danced through the door. Do I get to stab you again now? And steal his life force, Joan said. Sadie cackled. Aha! Joan pointed at Sadie. See? Evil laughs are perfectly normal, and I am not a mad scientist, just a regular scientist with a science laugh. Derek frowned, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Could we focus, please? You all seem very cavalier about the fact that we have mere months to break this curse. The smile dropped off of Joan's face, and she shook her head, lowering her eyes back to the graphs and images on the laptop, watching as levels continued to fall and the aura kept expanding, slowly shifting in color. No, we're not. If we don't joke about it, we'll panic or sink into depression. Shenanigans are our coping mechanism. She looked back up at Derek, eyebrows raised, defying him to deny them this comfort. He studied her for a moment. She maintained even eye contact. Finally he nodded. Fair enough. Carry on. Soberly, Sadie readied her needle and sample tube. She drew blood from his left arm, filling the tube with ruby liquid, and carefully sealed and labeled it, placing it in the mini-fridge beside the other specimen, a bottle of mustard, and a can of Diet Pepsi. Joan continued to monitor the screen until everything returned to normal and remained there for a full minute. Brandon assisted Sadie in setting up a microscope and other equipment to study the blood samples. Derek gazed fixedly at an empty spot on the wall across the room, apparently lost in thought. At last, Joan was satisfied with the data gathered. She stood and approached Derek. Okay, let's get you unhooked and set up for whoever's next. Veronica will be next, said Derek as Joan and Brandon began disconnecting him. Then she can observe the aura photos and subsequent subjects. I'm going to need to head out soon, Sadie interjected. It's a school night. I think your children would rather have their mother safe than worry about school. Derek frowned at her. She advanced upon him, shaking a fortunately empty test tube in his direction. Don't you dare tell me! Joan jumped in between them. Hey, look, it's 8:15 now. Let's just do Veronica's test and then see how we feel, okay? Derek, you're going to need to rest too. Aren't you jet-lagged? Derek, freed from the machine, stood and adjusted his already straight lab coat. This is important. I can handle the jet lag. Sadie raised an eyebrow. Uppers? He glowered. No denial, huh? Sadie shook the test tube at him again. Guess we'll know soon enough. Joan bit back a laugh, lowering her head over her notebook as she jotted down her observations of the test results. Sadie danced over to the table to prepare a needle for Veronica. Brandon opened the door, letting in a gust of cold wind, and called the rest of the crew back in. We're going to do Veronica's tests now, guys, if you want to help us reset. Beth and Ed were arguing heatedly as they entered, Ed's face turning bright red as he lambasted her. Dude, I just don't see how you can actually not believe in ghosts when you know that supernatural shit is out there. I will thank you to keep a civil tongue. As far as supernatural stuff goes, I only know that curses are real, Beth retorted, and that's the work of the devil. Ghosts are just nonsense. The devil? The devil my ass. Fists clenched by his sides, Ed turned to Brandon. Back me up on this, man. The devil is just a scapegoat, am I right? Wow, Sadie whispered, nudging to Joan. I had no idea Ed could even get angry. It's kind of working for me. Brandon put up both hands and backed away. I am not getting involved in this. Because I'm right. Beth raised pious blue eyes to the ceiling, clasping her hands in front of her. Jesus sent us this key to fight the curse and expel the devil from our lives. No, actually, I'm not going to bother arguing with you because you're so sure you're right that there's no point. Brandon beckoned Veronica onto the stool vacated by Derek, still addressing Beth as he deftly buckled the helmet onto Veronica's head. Honestly, I have no idea if ghosts exist. I've been focusing on research in other areas of the supernatural world. Ed seems pretty sure, though, and he has put in the time. I bow to his expertise on the subject. If I need information on fundamentalist Christian viewpoints, I'll consult you. Joan nudged Sadie back. Now that's the kind of well-thought-out, even-keeled reasoning that does it for me. Beth narrowed her eyes, her face squirming as she tried to work out whether she'd just been insulted, complimented, or brushed aside. She settled on a smile. Please do. You won't be disappointed. Joan and Brandon exchanged amused glances as Joan took Brandon's place, sticking electrodes onto Veronica's upper chest above her ample cleavage. Ed fiddled with one of his instruments. Listen, guys, can this be the last of the night? I know these tests are crucial and all, but I did drive for 5 hours today, and I know Veronica came from even further, to say nothing of Derek. I'm fine, Derek interrupted. Ed paused, tilting his head and studying Derek. Uppers? Joan, Brandon, and Sadie collapsed into laughter, Sadie grabbing the edge of the table to avoid falling. Derek sighed, his scowl darkening. Ed waved his hand, dismissing the issue. Well, anyway, none of my business. All I'm saying is that I need to get some shut-eye, and soon. Joan nodded to him, and Sadie needs to get her kids home. I agree. Let's call it a night after this. Everyone looked at Derek. His lips tightened, but he gave a reluctant nod. Fine. We'll be starting up early tomorrow morning, however, and I don't want any arguing, and minimal shenanigans. Sadie lifted her wineglass in a toast. To minimal shenanigans! The team worked more quickly this time, and the reset only took about 5 minutes, after which Joan waved Beth, Sadie, and Ed out the door. Derek joined Joan behind the laptop, and Brandon grabbed the box with the key once more. He shook it out into his hand and showed it to Veronica. Veronica took one look and keeled over, hitting the floor with a dull thud. On the screen, her vital signs flattened, her aura dissipated, and the ghost measuring instruments suddenly showed signs of spirit activity.